Let's talk about tax cuts. A bit later in the show, I'm going to talk about this. It's a significant backflip overnight in the UK about the abolition, now reinstatement of their top tier of the tax, of the marginal tax rates. Here, though, we've got legislated, so already promised stage 3 tax cuts. In the election, the government said we're not going to change them. We'll back them in, you elect us, and those tax cuts are safe. I got a sense today, I'm interested in your view, is the Treasurer changing his language a bit?
He certainly is. Now the question is he just floating a balloon to see what the reaction is? Or is this real? Are we going to see those tax cuts altered in the budget? Could it be that Jim Chalmers, who in opposition wanted to see them altered, but was opposed by Anthony Albanese and Richard Marles and ended up coming along with them, could he be making this argument in ERC at the moment? That's the sense I got. But it is so contradictory to what he said last week, for example. This is him at a press conference in Canberra last week, Jim Chalmers, where he says, don't worry about the tax cuts because they come into effect 24-25 and that's not going to have any bearing on inflation now.
Even if we took some of the steps that people have been urging us to do on stage 3 tax cuts, that would not change the inflationary environment that we confront right now. We haven't changed our position on the tax cuts. We're taking into consideration the economic conditions now.
Yet when it came to his press conference today, Peter, the Treasurer asked 5 times if he'll rule out altering the stage 3 tax cuts in the budget, didn't rule it out, and kept using this language, we're learning lessons from the UK. And of course, they've just recently abandoned their tax cut for higher income earners. I'm just going to play you 2 of those exchanges.
Incredibly negative response from the markets in the UK to the idea of future tax cuts funded by debt. Do you accept that there's a parallel with Australia because the stage 3 tax cuts are future tax cuts funded by debt?
A big part of our considerations is what's happening in the global economy, what's happening in the UK, the US, China, Europe, what that means for us at home. And so I think any responsible government sees what's happening in the UK and factors that into their own considerations.
Are you considering amending stage 3?
We haven't changed our position on stage 3. What I've said...
Discussions about changing policy internally?
We haven't changed our policy, and I'm obviously not going to get into conversations that people have for time to time. We are obviously factoring in the context of that budget, including global deteriorating global conditions.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of clever language. Let me decode that for people at home. He's not saying, and he's rightly saying, we haven't changed it with a D, but he's not ruling out that they will change or that they might change or that they're changing. All these other terms were there and they're taken off the table. It's interesting, and I listened to David Crowe there in the middle of the questions. I mean, there is no parallel between tax cuts already legislated a number of years ago for 24-25, so future financial years, and what's happening announced within 10 days and then reversed in the United Kingdom, which weren't even legislated and which were to take effect almost immediately upon legislation in and amongst a very difficult and inflationary environment. But we'll see how that plays out. I think you're right to say that there's some language shift there. We'll see what happens ahead of the budget. Talk to me about Islamic State. I mean, that's really been the biggest issue of the last 24 hours. It's repatriation of women and children. A meeting of National Cabinet, we're told this afternoon, or the National Security Committee of the formal cabinet, to tick off in an official sense this plan. Can you tell us anything more tonight, Andrew?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt the operation will go ahead. I think it's only going to that NSC forum because they're already intending to do it. They didn't want it to leak out. I think they just wanted to do the repatriation and say, we've done this repatriation.
Yeah, I think you're right on that one. We'll see how it all plays out. Andrew Clennell, thank you as always.
Thanks, Peta.